So, you want to be a real estate investor, but where do you start? How do you know what information and sources to trust? That's where I come in. I'm Jonny Cattani, and this is the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. Hey guys, real quick, before we start, go to investwithcattani.com and download my free ebook, Is Commercial Real Estate Recession Proof? Now to today's show. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Investor Relations Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Jonny Cattani, and I'm joined today by Kaaren Hall. Despite being in the midst of a recession and mortgage market collapse, Kaaren Hall founded and made a resounding success of uDirect IRA Services. The single mom discovered a strategic way to put her 20 plus years in mortgage banking, real estate, and property management to use. The solution was an untapped market for both her skills and investors. Self-directed IRA. Kaaren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Likewise. A lot of fun stuff to get to today. Very huge market for this self-directed IRAs and 401ks and whatnot. But before all of that, we kind of alluded in the intro, kind of how you got started, but let's go back there and kind of talk about the story of how you got started in all of this.
Yeah, well, it was 2009, like my bio says, it was in the middle of the recession. And I'd been at that time, I was in mortgage loan origination, but of course we know that where that went. And nowhere good at the time. So I needed a job, so I got a job working for a different self-directed IRA company. And so I worked there for a couple of years, and then I broke off on my own. And that's how I got started.
Awesome. I love it. And been going strong ever since.
Yeah.
So kind of talk about the progression. I mean, it really just seems like as of late, the education is coming to light in terms of people being able to use these vehicles to invest in alternative assets. So kind of talk about that progression and why that is, why maybe it's taken so long.
Yeah, you make such a good point, because IRAs were created in 1975, okay, before you were born. And when Gerald Ford, who was the president then, signed the ERISA Act into effect, okay? So he created IRAs, and an IRA is an IRA, but what makes it self-directed is the asset classes it can invest in. IRAs have, all, whether it's a typical IRA or self-directed, same rules. So that's been a long progression. So at the beginning, really, I think only certain people knew that this was a tax thing that they could do, and it wasn't as widely known. Gosh, how many is that? It's like over 45 years, it's been a long, long time. When I got into it in 2009, of course, it was, again, the recession, and banks weren't lending. They just weren't. And where before you could have 10 loans, on real estate outstanding at a time, it got lowered to 6 and sometimes 3, and credit was tight. Okay, so there was a problem. Well, at that time, self-directed IRAs emerged once again, or maybe even initially had a gigantic surge, because that's where the money was, right? You've got a deal, you want to continue your investing, you need some capital. Maybe you got a project and you just need an extra 50 grand to finish out this rehab. Where are you going to get it? From a bank? No, but guess what? Even today, you can tap into what is now a $39 trillion pool of funds, right? Pretty sweet. So from time to time, when the economy goes wonky, you can always say, look, maybe you can't get money here, but there are a lot of people looking for return in their retirement accounts. And if you're the one to provide it and it all works out well, then it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely. Wow. 39 trillion. That's not just a little pocket change there. So what are some ways that those of us who raise capital and sponsors and operators can, educate and tap into this?
Right. Well, I think it starts off with just a simple qualifying question, right? So when you talk to people that might be interested in investing with you, you can say, do you have an IRA or do you have a 401k with a previous employer? Because if they say yes, then they have the money to invest in your deal, and they probably don't even know it. So you say, okay, well, hey, Carl, call my friend Kaaren, she'll walk you through it, email uDirect, they'll help you with it. But what happens is you don't have to be the expert as the asset sponsor in self-directed IRAs. That's what we do. So you can hand it off and we'll take really good care of them. But I think that it's important too to obviously have the knowledge, and that's what I hope to impart in this, in this event here today. But there's some rules you need to follow, things you can and can't do, and things that might even be surprising. So we help our account holders to follow the rules, but ultimately following the rules is the responsibility of the account holder. It's self-directed. It's just like if you write a check and you can write a check for anything, right? The bank doesn't tell you what you're allowed to write your checks for. Well, that's not the best analogy, but when you write a check, you've written it, right? And it's your responsibility what you write it for. I think that's the analogy. And so that's the same thing with the self-directed IRA. You ask for funds to be dispersed. Now we're going to see, if we can see an issue with it, we're going to let you know. But ultimately, the responsibility is with the account holder to not commit a prohibited transaction.
Absolutely. And it's important to understand those. So let's kind of get into that. What are some things that it's as an account holder, obviously these are a very useful tool, but if used incorrectly, things can really backfire because at that point you're going against the IRS and you'll lose that every time usually.
Yeah.
So what are some things we need to know to, use them correctly?
Right. So when you were a kid, every kid in the world played keep away, right? Keep away. This is a game of keep away from prohibited transactions. That's what that is. So real quick. So you have to just know a couple things. One is that certain people are disallowed to your IRA, like your ascendants and descendants, right? Your parents and grandparents, you and your spouse, your children and grandchildren, disallowed. Plus any 50-50 business partner or anybody who's a fiduciary to the plan. Okay, they're disallowed. They can't play ball. So we're going to play to win. Who are the players? So the players are people out to the sides of the family tree, like your aunts and uncles, your brothers and sisters, your nieces and nephews, your, whatever, your next door neighbor, all okay, all right? There are exceptions, I'll talk about that, but those are the players. And also the players include, of course, the account holder. I mean, the most important person in the whole game is the account holder. The IRA, the self-directed IRA, is a tool in their tool belt to use to invest, use this special tax protected money. And then there's uDirect IRA Services, the best company in the world, in my opinion. Little plug, shameless plug. And then when I founded the company, though, I enlisted the services of a trust company custodian. So we have worked in tandem for 13 years now. And so this is how it works. I mean, you open, fund, invest, and those are the 3 steps of self-direction. But again, you need to know who's disallowed to the IRA. You need to know who the players are. And then you need to know what a prohibited transaction is. And that is any one of these disallowed people benefiting today from the IRA money, right? So your IRA doesn't make a loan to your wife to start a business. Your IRA doesn't, because your wife is disallowed, right? Your IRA doesn't make a loan to your kids to go to college because your children are disallowed. They're disallowed persons. Your IRA doesn't buy a house that your parents own. They're disallowed, okay? So you kind of get the idea there. But also these disallowed people can't, it gets a little, interesting here, but a disallowed person can't provide services to the plan. So say, for example, you have a fund or you're raising capital and you're like, I want to invest my IRA in my deal. Well, wait a minute, it's your deal. So first off, you're disallowed to your IRA, plus you're offering services to the plan as a decision maker, like a C-suite person in that investment. You can't do that because you're a disallowed party, right? So that's what that looks like.
Got it. Okay. So you couldn't buy an investment property and your, one of your kids or your parents are the property manager.
Correct. Exactly right. Exactly.
Got it. Okay. But siblings are allowed.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Any idea for the logic there or?
Well, I mean, obviously I've had a long time to think about it. It's been a few years, but yeah, I think it's because if you were to pass away, who would immediately inherit your estate? Say you died without a will or a trust. It would be your ascendants and descendants, right? So they would benefit first. So the purpose really is to keep this money for the long term, to use it for retirement purposes only. That is a real, buzz phrase with the IRS, retirement purposes only. But that's great because, we're going to live longer than ever, longer than people did 100 years ago, and we're going to need that money even more than they did. If your life expectancy was really, I'm not kidding, I'll look this up, 54 years old. Okay. I mean, my little pumpkin would be expiring right now. I'd have to take, be careful. But now we're going to live to be at least 70, 73 or something like that. So we've got an extra 23 years to live. So what are we going to do with those 23 years? We have to save for them so that we can enjoy them. We don't just want to, we want to have a varied life with lots of experiences. So we have to save for that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that seems like pretty sound logic for sure. So, one strategy then that you can really use to avoid anything is just stay passive.
Because arm's length, that is that's brilliant. Yes, arm's length is a key. So if your IRA owns, say, a single family home and you have renters, great to have a property manager because they can collect the rents. They can go in and fix things. They can do everything. It's arm's length, and there's no chance of you offering services to the plan.
Got it. Okay. So that's pretty simple then, I guess, at least to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now you guys don't advise on, you were talking offline, you don't advise on any of the investments, which means you don't review them, right? So someone wants to invest in something, you're strictly just a custodian more or less, or administrator, I guess is probably a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, we do look at them. In fact, I had one today where somebody wanted to make an investment, and we could see that, behind the scenes, it appears that there's a prohibited transaction because we looked at it. And so we said, hey, look, we can't do this because you've got a prohibited transaction in here. So we did look at the investment, and for IRA purposes, like the question we're asking ourselves when we look at a transaction is it administratively feasible? Is it an asset that we can hold? And if the answer is yes, great. If it's no, then we have to pass.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. So recently, or I guess not recently, but relatively speaking, IRA contributions have increased. Is that correct? It was 5,500 if you were under 55 or something like that.
Yeah.
Now it's 6,000.
Yeah, it is. And so you'll see these kinds of indexed increases every year based on, inflation, which means it'll be like $12,000 next year, right?
Honestly, at this rate.
But it is $6,000 right now for a traditional Roth. If you're under 50, if you're 50 plus, it's $7,000. You get an extra $1,000. Well, here's something interesting. I'm going to go off on a tangent. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
But regarding these contributions, we've got this act before Congress called basically the Secure Act 2.0. That's what we're calling it, Secure Act 2.0. And if it passes the way it's written, it's already passed the House, but if it goes through the Senate, then like the way they index the contributions, they would also index the catch-up contribution. So the older you are, the bigger the catch-up contribution you get. So that's something that might happen. It's pending.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know. Some legislation on the positive side of things.
Yeah.
I know recently, Ross in particular, I believe, were kind of on the chopping block. Is there anything else you're keeping an eye on moving forward?
Yeah, it's Roths. I mean, Roths are such awesome tools, where you can actually save tax-free. And there was a year, I think it was 2018, where they were, one thing that was in consideration in Congress was something they called it Rothification, making everything Roth, right? Then you change the players and it's like, no, not so much. We don't want, people who are extremely wealthy to take advantage of tax protected status. It's like, okay, fair enough. You have 10 million or $1 billion in your Roth IRA. Do you really need government assistance in, you kind of don't. But so I could see that. That's reasonable. No problem with that. But no, everything's good right now. I mean, the Build Back Better Act didn't pass. I'll tell you what, that was a can of worms because if it had passed as written, the sections that affected IRAs would have negatively affected asset sponsors, would have very negatively affected savers, and it would have been very damaging. So fortunately, it did not pass. It did not go forward. It was killed in November.
That's right. And that was the one where potentially alternative assets were not only no longer going to be allowed, but or they were even potentially making a time period where everything had to be liquidated. Is that right?
Yeah, that was up for consideration. It didn't fly. So, and I think that was wise that it didn't. It just as a side note, I mean, that Build Back Better Act had what 142,000 sections. Okay, a section like would have one of these tiny sections out of 142,000, okay, would have decimated the retirement savings of people. So what about the other, 142, thousand? A lot.
999.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. 999. It would have, I mean, who could read that many sections, comprehend them, really mentally understand the unintended consequences? It's just a mess. So I think we need to understand the laws that we're passing.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So let's, now that you have someone self-directed IRA or uDirect has it, what does that process look like in terms of, hey, they've identified, let's say, a syndication and they want to invest. What does that process look like?
Well, the whole thing is a three-step process, essentially, to start. You open an account. So you fill out a form on our website. It's pretty quick. You get it filled out. Then we need your driver's license and a W-9, things like that. Then we get your account open straight away. You get a password and ID so you can log in. And we've got a lot of neat features online like bill pay. If you have an asset that has bills, like maybe a single family home that has garbage collection, it has to be paid every month. You can go online and pay it without a lot of fuss, and it funds really quickly. But if you're going to invest in an asset like a syndication, the second step after opening it is funding it. So the money would be coming from another IRA called a transfer. You transfer another IRA. If you have a previous employer's plan, that's called a rollover. Right? So you move the money from that previous employer plan to the IRA. And that can take, up to 2 weeks. So you need to really think about that. So you open it and you fund it from an IRA, from a 401k, or you can contribute and make a contribution. All right. So 3 ways to fund it. So open and funding. Now you're going to invest. So you want to make sure there's enough money in your IRA to fund the face amount of your investment. Like you don't just move 50,000 in and think you can just move 50,000 back out, because you're going to have some fees. Our fees are very reasonable, but there are fees. And so you want to make sure that you leave a small pad in there for fees. And awesome. So you're going to give us a direction of investment form. It's something like a check where you're telling us, who you are and how much money to disperse, what it's for, and you sign it. And that's a direction of investment form. Then you give us we call the supporting documentation. And that supporting documentation is the subdocs, the PPM, we review and fund it at that point, typically.
Got it. Okay. And so in order to do a rollover or move everything, does it have to be cash, or you guys can hold, let's say there's, security like stock in there?
I see.
All of that be moved as well?
No, we're not going to take your market correlated assets, because we're a self-directed IRA company. So we only hold alternative assets. We're not licensed broker dealers. We don't hold market assets like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's super important. So what are kind of some misconceptions around these? One thing I've heard, kind of from the sponsorship side of things is the timeline. It can take a really long time to sometimes get some of the paperwork done and get the funds, into the accounts and funded for them to be an investor. So are there any other kind of misconceptions around these accounts?
Normally our turn times are real quick, so we don't have somebody waiting weeks. If they're waiting weeks, it's because there is some really big problem, that's really gumming up the system. And usually it's a third party problem. So we'll just leave it at that. But it's pretty, it's pretty straightforward.
So we haven't really touched on, kind of solo 401ks, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The contribution limits there are much higher for IRAs or compared to IRAs.
Yes, they are. So if you want to have a solo 401k, it's a great account. I mean, it's got a lot of great bells and whistles, but first you have to qualify. So you have to be self-employed. Okay. You can be a solopreneur. You could have an LLC, C Corp, S Corp, fine. but your company will sponsor the plan. Okay. So where an IRA is one thing, it's an individual retirement arrangement. A solo K is two things. There's the corporate, the company plan, and the individual participant. All right. Now, this is a case where husband and wife can kind of do this together. Say, for example, husband and wife own the same company, no full-time employees, but they both work in it. So they can have one company plan and they can each be participants with separate accounts under the plan. So that's cool. That's one thing you can't do in an IRA. Another thing is with the solo K, excuse me, you mentioned the higher contribution limits. That's very true. You can take a loan from your solo K for personal reasons. Okay, it's either the lesser of $50,000 or 50% of the account value, the lesser of. You have to pay your account back at a market rate over 5 years. Okay, because it's like an investment. It's, you can have the money, but then if you need that money, maybe to send a child to college or take a vacation or buy your own, home or whatever, like a personal residence, do something personal, you can do that. But that loan is actually an asset in the plan. So if you're paying it back at a rate so that, the plan will still continue to grow in value as you pay it back. So you can borrow money from a solo K for personal use. That's huge. Again, with the solo K, it has two buckets. It has the plan bucket and the participant bucket. So the entire thing combined can't exceed, I believe it's $61,000, 25% of your income, or $61,000, the lesser of. It's also indexed. It also changes annually. So say husband and wife, right? You're both principals in this company that you own together, no full-time employees. Effectively, you could put $122,000 into a plan, saving it for later, and have that money be tax deferred. Boom. I mean, so sometimes we have banner years. Sometimes it's small year and we do small year things like Roth conversions, and some years it's a big year and we don't need all the the funds that we earn that year, stick it into a solo K big time and then save for later, because later will come, and you're going to need it.
Absolutely. Wow, what an incredible vehicle. When I was a broker, definitely did a lot of paperwork for loans out of the 401ks. If I understand correctly, kind of what you were mentioning, when you're paying it back, it's plus interest, but all of that just goes into your account anyway.
That's right. You're paying yourself instead of the IRS. Yeah.
Which I always found to be so fascinating, because you see so many, the IRA has stipulations and so many stipulations, around a lot of things we do. And then you have this vehicle that kind of just really is a huge tax advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many tax advantages do we have? I mean, we can have kids. That's a lot more work than a solo 401k, I promise. Right? So we don't have a lot of tax breaks, and it is one that stands. I think right now, I was telling you about that Secure Act 2.0. I mean, our Congress, both sides of the House, all political views believe saving for retirement is important. It's a bipartisan issue, and that's huge. I mean, we all agree that we need money for later.
Absolutely. And the amount that we need is increasing. So it's important to allow the limits to increase and some of the advantages to, be put in place so that, like you mentioned, we're living longer now. Mm-hmm. So you need more money. Things are costing more money. I remember, gosh, even when I first started, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, you could have $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million and be fine. But now $1 million, like, really, what is that?
Middle class.
Yeah, which is crazy to say, because so many of us be like, yes, I would love $1 million, but ultimately that's all you have for retirement. You're, by the time you really pay for everything and maintain your lifestyle, you really don't have that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing of it is investors are, my experience, really clever, savvy people, and they find a way. They find a way to do things. And I just love that. They're always looking outside the box, problem solving. How can we fix this? And like always digging for the answers. And that's how they do it. That's how investors do it, or that's how we do it, I should say. So that's really good. But you make a good point about, if I could just add this, that say, for example, you had $100,000 and you think, wow, that's a lot of money. I'm going to retire on that. I mean, you were talking about $1 million. I'm talking about 100,000. But if you're 59 and a half and you're like, okay, I'm going to retire here and I'm going to die when I'm 86 and a half, like you're an actuary and you know your actual date of death. So you've got 30 years here and you're going to live on that 100K for 30 years. Do you know what? Assuming no gain or loss, it's only going to give you $400 a month. I mean, you can't even buy gasoline for that much.
Gosh, that's so sad, but true.
You need to save. Gotta save.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, I really appreciate all the insight. You've shed some light on, again, kind of a vehicle, a tool that I think a lot of more education is coming to light, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning. Before we get to the end here, what are some of the things that you guys are doing to help kind of spread that awareness and different things like that?
I've really dedicated myself to doing that for the last 15 years. I speak on awesome podcasts like this one. I go out and I do a lot of public speaking. I have a real estate investment club as well that I own, and it is called OC-REIA, Orange County REIA. I'm in Orange County, California, OCREIA.com. And every month we have somebody come on and teach about some aspect of real estate investing. Sometimes it's about how to save what you earn, like the tax portion. Sometimes it's about anything, multifamily and all different kinds of things, and fix and flip, every sort of aspect. So we just teach. We have a huge library of blog articles on lots of different topics, notes and things like that. So we just do a tremendous amount of education and speaking and getting out there and mingling with the investors and helping them out.
Awesome. I love it. And definitely important for, capital raisers and sponsors as well to educate themselves so that they can talk to their investors. And as you mentioned in the beginning, kind of ask that magic question of whether or not they've got that money sitting around, because again, they may not realize that, they can use that to invest with.
Yeah. And then it's all expenses of IRA owned assets have to be paid for by the IRA that owns the asset. And all proceeds that come from that asset have to go back to the IRA that owns the asset. It may seem, too much to say that, but it's really not. I think it's really important everybody understands that that's how it's done. But your IRA does pay for all of the expenses. So say, for example, you're going to buy a single family home, earnest money, closing costs, rehab, property tax, the whole bit, all paid by the IRA. So you leave a pad.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome. That's good to know. And that's required.
It is. Yeah. We ask for a 10% pad because you're going to need it. If you don't have it and something comes up and your IRA can't pay for it, then you have to sell the asset, so we don't want you to come up into a situation where, we helped you get into this asset that you can't maintain. And that would be irresponsible of us. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. That's a good thing to know. I didn't realize you couldn't use any outside, but I guess that makes sense, right? Because essentially at that point it becomes an entity that owns this and it's required for the entity to pay it.
That's the exact logic behind it. Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Good to know. Appreciate that insight. Cool. Well, we're coming up, like I said, towards the end. I've got 5 questions I ask all of my guests. It's the
Oh gosh.
5.
Okay.
Prepare yourself. Just kidding. No, they're
Yeah,
great. First question. What's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor?
The best advice I ever got from a mentor is to have a database. Now, back then, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm older than 30. And so is my son. But the thing of it is to have, then it was a Rolodex. That's what I'm aging myself. But you have a Rolodex. And he says, see this? He says to me, this is my career right here. And I took that to heart when I heard that. And I became a networking queen. And I would go to all the networking events I could, meet people, made lots and lots of friends, and collected business cards for years and years. I obviously with COVID, we haven't been doing that so much. It's a different, mode, but just to network and get out there and meet people, because your network is your net worth. I know you hear it because it's true.
It's so cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah, best advice. That's why I have this company, because of my network.
I love it. That's so awesome. What is it about your career that makes you feel like you're fulfilling your why?
Gosh, you mentioned at the beginning that at the time of founding uDirect, I'm a single mom, and I mean, now my kids, my son just had a child, so now I'm a grandmother. Oh gosh, I can't say single grandmother, because then I sound so old, I should wear like, cut off all my hair and wear lace collars or something, right? Not yet. But back then it was all about my kids. It's like, how am I going to take care of my kids? I've got, it's a recession. It was a really scary time, and I got through, and everything was all about taking care of them and finding an ethical, wonderful way that benefits, the community to do that. And I actually found it. So I was pretty blessed. Not a day that I'm not grateful for it. But
I love that. And that's awesome. You took that risk having, the kids, but burn
all the ships. Right. You know what that's about. So that's where I was, and it worked. So now
awesome.
I have to just like brag again. We're sitting on like about $750 million in client assets.
Wow.
Not bad. I started out with a blonde with a laptop and a cup of coffee, and now we've got, thousands of clients and lots of money. So
do you have like, are people all over the country, like your employees?
Yeah, not my employees. My employees are they all local? Yeah, they're all California. But we're about to, we'll see about that in the future. There's room for consideration there, but we have account holders in every single state. So we are a national company.
Awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. What is your favorite non-real estate or investment related book?
Are there books written that aren't about? Okay, the Bible. How about that one?
There you go.
I've heard it's a good book. Has some wisdom.
Yeah, we have a few people. A lot of people love the book of Proverbs. I'm not religious myself, but heard a lot of great advice comes from that. So
yeah, a lot of wisdom for sure.
Love it. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, being able to eat cake and not gain weight. That's the best I could think of. Like that would be my superpower.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we would all love that, especially because I find myself still trying to not eat sweets, but I don't think I'll ever get away from it.
Yeah.
Listen, anyone says that they avoid processed sugar, please tell me how you do it, because I don't know how.
Not in this world. Yeah.
Cool. So you kind of plugged it a little bit before in terms of what you're doing for education, but what's the best way for people to get a hold of you and learn more?
Well, it's our website. It's the letter U, uDirectIRA.com. You can email us just info@uDirectIRA.com. So that's awesome. And we're all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, little Twitter action going on today. So Facebook, Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, Instagram, all that. We've got a great blog. We've got a YouTube account. And so we're all over social media too. And it's also a great way when you join our friend or join our various social media outlets, it lets you interact with other investors. So that's a good thing.
Awesome. I love it. Do you do the social media? Are you on social media?
Yes, I am.
See, that's still barely a day over 29. Come on.
Exactly. That was in my bio, right? Yeah.
I love it. Kaaren, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the insight.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Listen, I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you know when the next video is coming out. Even though this is technically a daily podcast, you know it's coming out the next day. We have a ton of content coming your way. So please like and subscribe. It helps a ton. Leave comments. Would love to know what you guys think. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.